Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Also, wherever you are in the world, look who I have here with me, Dr. Gary Richter, once again for a second appearance. Hi, Dr. Richter.
Hey there.
We're I asked him to come back on to talk about his latest books on longevity, anti-aging. How do we keep our pets living longer, healthier, health span, lifespan? I actually just digested his book, his dog book, super fast. I don't have any cats, and that was some time ago, when it came out, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And so here we are. So we're going to talk to you about some really good, actionable things you can do, from the lowest hanging fruit to the very high end, more expensive, but maybe bigger bang for your buck, but only if you absolutely need it. We're going to talk about all that. Dr. Rick, does that sound fair?
That sounds very fair. I'm excited about this.
All right, awesome. So I'm a bit of an anti-aging nerd. So my super quick story, Dr. Richter, is, my two dogs were my best friends growing up. I was a bullied kid. I was closest to my dogs. Every day I spent a lot of time training them after school, and a very deep connection to my dogs. And once I lost my first dog early, and I realized how short that lifespan was, and I held his head in my hands, looking him into the eyes as he was going under euthanasia because we had to put him to sleep. Boy, that just hit me, and honestly, it just shaped the rest of my life. And forevermore, I would say, honestly, a fair word would be obsessed with anti-aging for dogs. How do I eke out, squeeze out, grind out whatever I have to do, at least, months or years into whatever dog I have, and work through his genetics, his epigenetics, and all of that. So let's start there. Are genetics the final word? No matter what, that's what you got, and you can't do anything else about it?
So in short, no. Obviously your genetics are your DNA, and in the sense of like, it's your DNA, and you're born with what you're born with. That is kind of where we are right now, until we get a little bit further down the road technologically, from the standpoint of gene therapy and gene editing. We're not quite there yet, but that is coming. But the real story is that your genetics, your DNA, your chromosomes are really just the beginning. And what I mean by that is everybody has an enormous amount of DNA and an enormous number of genes. And not all of the genes that we have are expressed in any given moment. So some genes may be sitting there not doing anything. So the real story comes a little bit downstream from genetics, starting with what is called epigenetics. And epigenetics is really the term that is used for what genes your body is currently expressing right now. So we know that your epigenetics, your dog's epigenetics, your cat, what have you, epigenetics changes over time as we age, and given our sort of relative health. So for example, so you can do a thing called epigenetic age testing for both people, dogs, other species as well. And what this test does is it looks at your DNA, it looks at patterns on your DNA, and it can make an approximation of how old the individual is based on their levels of gene expression. Now, that is not exactly correlated to your chronological age. So a person could be 30 years old chronologically, but depending on how healthy they are, their epigenetic age could vary quite dramatically. So, to kind of keep going down this path, take that 30-year-old person. If that 30-year-old person is a triathlete, and they're incredibly healthy and health conscious, they may be that they get their epigenetic age testing done and it comes back at 20. The other 30-year-old could be an overweight smoker, and their epigenetic age may come back as 45.
Yep.
So it varies a lot based on your health. Now, the good news is that you can actually change your epigenetics. So that overweight smoker with an epigenetic age of 45, if they quit smoking and quit drinking and lose weight and start exercising within a fairly short period of time, they're going to be able to really dramatically drop their epigenetic age. So that's actually a really good way for us to understand how healthy the body is, purely beyond what we can test for from like a standard blood chemistry panel, for example, and beyond understanding what an animal or a person's chronological age is. I'll not go too much further here, but I just want to say that it even goes beyond epigenetics, because epigenetics ultimately translates into what proteins the body is creating. So so we go from epigenomics to proteomics to transcriptomics. It keeps going on and on. There's a whole field of study now that is actually called omics, all of these various things, because each one of these things has a very significant impact on our health and our aging. So there's so much that goes on far, far beyond what our genetics say. So long story short, your genetics is not your destiny, and it certainly is not that of your pet either.
Hey there, this is Rob Ryan. I just want to say how much we enjoy making this content for you here. And if you are enjoying it, would you like our video down below? And would you subscribe to our YouTube channel? It sure does help us get discovered by more people like you who need information like this. And also down below in our description, the top link is to our trial pack. We hope you'll order one for your dog so your dog can have fermented superfoods that give them nutrition like they can't find anywhere else. Hard to get nutrients that are easily absorbed. Thank you very much. Now back to the show. It's really funny you bring this up. I was just in Dallas a week ago, got this test. I'm 52 today, almost 50.
Happy birthday.
Well, no, I didn't mean that, but I'm 53 pretty soon. So thank you. I'll take the happy birthday. And I'm biologically, epigenetically 39.
Well done.
So now all I want to do is get it down to like 35, but I'm not sure I'll be able to do that. But I really appreciate that. The other thing that's so interesting is, as you're talking about these omics, and I'm thinking of pathways and enzymatic pathways and all these things that are so interesting, but also so complicated. You can go down that whole rabbit hole for hours and still not know it all. But like glyphosate exposure shuts off pathways like the shikimate pathway. And so let's talk a little bit about when we talk about the easiest things we could do to extend our lives. Let's talk about the cheapest, easiest, and freest thing we can do, which is no cost thing we can do, which is removing horrible things from our environment, our home, and that sort of thing. So why don't you tell us what some of your top toxic things are to remove from the home or the home environment?
Sure. It's interesting that there's been a couple of studies that have come out that have shown that depending on what's going on in your home, the air pollution inside your house may actually be worse than what's going on outside, depending on sort of what cleaning products you use and what methods you use to cook, and your furniture and your carpet and all that kind of stuff. Certainly cleaning up your home environment, from the perspective of, quite obviously, if there's a smoker in the house, that has to stop. But going beyond that, using natural cleaning products instead of it's products that have any number of long acting chemical compounds in there, things that have a lot of like artificial scents. Like people love these various things to put in their house that make your house smell good, but you got to think about, like, you're breathing that stuff in. So what is it? It may or may not be problematic. Like if you're using natural essential oils, it's probably fine. If you're using something else, it might not be. There are other things in our homes that are going to be much more difficult to deal with. So for example, legally speaking, carpet and furniture has to be treated with flame retardants. That's the law. There's a very obvious reason for that. But those things off gas, and we breathe those things in. In fact, that's one of the theories on why hyperthyroidism is so common in cats. It's theorized that it has to do with them breathing in these flame retardants when they're laying on couches and furniture and whatnot. They just seem to be particularly predisposed to that kind of stuff. Other things like cooking, Teflon. If you cook with Teflon, with non-stick cookware, and you overheat that pan, you're off-gassing Teflon into the air. Side note, if you happen to have a pet bird, you can literally kill a bird by off-gassing Teflon into the air. They're that sensitive to it. But that gives you an idea, like even though, you or your dog may not drop over dead from that, it doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. Wow. So there are absolutely things that we can do. There are also things that are, kind of beyond our control. And I think this is kind of one of these situations in life where, you control for what you can control for and try not to worry too much about the rest.
Yeah. And if you're, the thing you're talking about when it comes to furniture and carpets, it's called off-gassing. For the most part, it's off-gassing of those chemicals. Yeah. Those chemicals live inside the foam, the padding, you name it. Could even be in the way that they treat the wood in the furniture by, sealing it and all of that. And so you just really want to have a really good air purifier.
Yeah, get good ventilation. Open a window.
Ventilation. Yeah. In the hot times of year, you open up the windows in the morning like I do and then close them and put on that air purifier. And do you have any opinion on air purifiers? Like they should have, like I've done a lot of research that having carbon, a good amount of carbon filtration is necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of different air purifier options out there. Most people have heard of HEPA filters. HEPA filters are great for filtering out particulates. So dust, mold, things like that can be very harmful. What they're not particularly good at are like these off-gassing, these volatile hydrocarbons and whatnot that off-gas. If anybody's not really sort of clear on what off-gassing is, that new car smell? That's all the plastic in the car off-gassing into the car. It's not really good for us. It does sort of give you that idea of, oh my gosh, I have a new car. That's wonderful, but you probably shouldn't be breathing it. But nonetheless, like HEPA filters don't really do much for that kind of stuff. And that's where carbon filters can come in handy, or what you're looking for is a filter that filters out what they call VOCs. And really, you're really looking for a filter that kind of covers both VOCs and particulates so you can get as much out of the air as possible.
Yeah. I have I don't get paid or anything to say this. I have a Austin air purifier, and it has this huge unit that it does VOCs. It has a ton. I forget how many pounds of carbon to absorb. And what it does is it stores those VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And then after a couple of years, you have to throw it away. So anyway, and it's the HealthMate Plus, I think I have. You go to austinair.com. But there's lots of companies. Just get one with really good VOC protection. That's all I have to say. Yeah. All right, cool. So removing toxins from your environment, you can go into a whole deep dive, folks. Forget the plug-in air fresheners, the synthetic candles. Like those are not doing you any good. I treat it as if it's giving me cancer and my pet's cancer, whether it is or it isn't. I treat it that way, and then you're safe. If I think it's going to give me cancer slowly over time, I'm not interested in it. Sure. All right. So let's go to the next level up. So that was least expensive, easiest, frankly, free, just keeping things away from your environment. So what would be the next thing up that we can do to give us the biggest bang for our anti-aging dollar?
Well, arguably, certain things we just talked about are not free from the perspective of like an air purifier. And I think it's worth saying, like, those Austin air purifiers are amazing. They're also not cheap, but I would still absolutely recommend one. But in the sense of something that actually is free, to me, there's three core tenets to longevity, whether we're talking about an animal or a person. And those three things are diet, exercise, and lifestyle. Of the three, exercise is free. Exercise is dirt cheap. Get outside and walk. It costs nothing. And that is true for your dog as well, or exercise your cat, but do it indoors. But nonetheless, there is plenty of evidence, and it's very well referenced in my books, to show that appropriate amounts of exercise promote longevity and promote good health in all species studied. Full stop. You got to go back to, you look at sort of genetically how our bodies were designed to thrive. Well, as our bodies were evolving, as our dogs and cats' bodies were evolving, tens of thousands, millions of years ago, exercise was part of the daily routine because it had to be. There was no couch back in the day. So that's how that's how we're designed. That's how our biological machine is designed to thrive. Now, when it comes to dogs in particular, it's very, very important to understand what is appropriate exercise, because exercise can be damaging. Animals can become injured, both in the short term, sort of like, for example, a blown out knee, or in the longer term, promoting the development of arthritis in dogs as they get older, if they were over-exercised or exercised improperly when they were younger. What is an appropriate amount of exercise very much depends on your pet. For example, if you have a border collie, that's a dog that's going to need to get out and run around and really, really get some good strenuous exercise. For both mental and physical reasons, those dogs need to get out and do what they need to do. If you have an English bulldog, you probably don't want to take that dog on a 5-mile run. They might not survive. No. So as you can see, breed, species, genetics, age, physical conditioning, all of that plays into what is appropriate. The one thing that I would say from a dog exercise perspective that maybe not should be completely avoided, but kept to a minimum, would be any sort of really high impact activity. And what I mean by that is frisbee chasing, ball chasing, especially if you have a chuck it, really aggressive fetch. Anything that involves a lot of quick starts and short stops puts an enormous amount of strain on their joints. Some of the most arthritic spines I've ever seen in dogs is in dogs that were frisbee dogs when they were younger. So, you've probably seen in person or on video these dogs going up and doing this twisting thing that they do in the air when they catch that frisbee. It looks super cool. It is hell on their spine. You are causing chronic micro trauma to their spine, and they will pay for it later, just like any human athlete that was really active when they were young will frequently pay for that as they get older. So these are things that we really need to think about. But to your point, exercise costs nothing. We'll talk about nutrition. There is a cost involved with that. Lifestyle, on the other hand, is largely inexpensive as well. Although, again, it does take some thought on our part to create what I would describe as a relatively low stress, high enjoyment lifestyle for our pets.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, I'm thinking about my current dog, Black Labrador, Gus, who's always ball. It's probably the ball over food, and he's very food driven. And I play fetch with him, but it's what he loves. But he loves to jump. He's one of those dogs. He will jump for it. Yeah. And he's 7 now. He's almost 8. And the whole time, because he exercises so much, I've had to stay on top of him with his chiropractic. Uh-huh. And, you land and then when jump, land, compression.
Yep.
Every time I see that, I can't help because, I pay the vet bills. So I pay the chiropractic bills. So I'm like, okay, this is really good for him, but I also have to stay on top of his wellness and his nutrition. But now that he's turning 8, I'm going to start, I keep him in a command, a weight command, and then throw it and then let him go get it. So it's no more of that running, jumping,
Sure.
craziness. So this is a good point you bring up. And the breed specific, these dogs like Frenchies and Bulldogs, boy, I see people with them out in the summer at like 1 p.m. And I'm like, this is not good for this breed, wrong breed.
Yeah, I would agree. Bulldogs or there's a whole class of dogs that from a veterinary perspective, we call them brachycephalic dogs, but you can think of it as the dogs with sort of the squished in faces, bulldogs, pugs, shih tzus, these sorts of things. They tend not to breathe as well as dogs with kind of a longer muzzle. And as such, they don't temperature regulate as well. I mean, remember that dogs don't sweat really. So they temperature regulate through their breathing. And if they don't do that very well, then they can very, very easily get overheated. Certainly some brachycephalic dogs breathe better than others. I have seen bulldogs that breathe remarkably well. I have seen bulldogs that when they're laying on the floor, they sound like they're going to die. Just from breathing at rest, their airways are so not right. So it depends. Again, it depends on the individual. But all that said, in the heat of the summer, maybe that's not a dog that you should be exercising real strenuously, at 1 p.m. on a hot summer day.
Yeah, no. All right. So breed specific and I think medicine, individualized medicine is always better than giving the same thing to all breeds and all ages and all types of dogs. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the judicious use of Western medicine. So tell me a little bit about what your opinion is on that.
Okay, so let me preface this conversation by saying that I am an integrative practice veterinarian. So I practice a lot of holistic medicine, acupuncture, herbs, chiropractic, hyperbaric oxygen, what have you. I also practice conventional Western medicine, blood work, x-rays, ultrasound, vaccinations, all of that sort of stuff. And what I want to stress here as we get into this conversation is that there is an appropriate time and use for all of these things. There is also a way that these things are inappropriately and, quite frankly, frequently overused in a lot of veterinary medical practice. And this is where you, as a pet owner, need to be informed and need to be able to judiciously ask the right questions. Yeah. So, I think the thing that everybody kind of talks about right off the bat are vaccines. And certainly in a post-COVID world, a lot of people are very, shall we say, vaccine sensitive, or at least sensitive about the concept of vaccinations. Yeah. So what I generally tell people is I am not anti-vax. I'm anti-over-vax. And the reality is that most dogs and most cats out there are probably over-vaccinated. So do you need to, say, vaccinate puppies for distemper and parvo and rabies as puppies? You're damn right you do. Anybody that's ever seen a dog die from parvo never wants to see that happen again. And that disease is everywhere. Don't kid yourself. It's everywhere. That said, once that dog has been appropriately vaccinated for distemper and parvo as a puppy, more often than not, they will retain immunity to those diseases for years, if not a lifetime, just based on that series of puppy vaccines. Now, you have to do your due diligence to make sure that's the case by running vaccine titers to check their antibody levels. You don't want to just take it on faith that they're immune. But in my experience, most dogs that were vaccinated properly as puppies never need to be vaccinated for distemper and parvo again. They will titer positive for a lifetime. When it comes to rabies, a similar thing is true. However, there's a other side of the coin when it comes to rabies, which is that regardless of where you live, rabies vaccinations in dogs are legally required. Yeah. So that is a thing that you have to contend with, and you'll need to talk with your veterinarian about. And I am certainly not advocating for people to not rabies vaccinate their dog, which would be outside of the legal situation.
And that varies state to state.
It varies state to state, but every state requires rabies vaccines in dogs.
Yep.
And just to be clear, the reason for that is that rabies is transmissible to humans, and it is more or less 100% fatal if you get it. So that's why that law exists. Distemper and parvo will kill your dog, but it won't kill you. And thus your state public health department isn't as concerned as they would be for, say, rabies. But that said, other vaccines, and we don't have time to go into every vaccine for dogs and cats, but the bottom line is that some vaccines are necessary, some are not, and it really depends a lot on what your pet's lifestyle is. The way I look at vaccines are, when the questions that I ask are, is this animal likely to get exposed to this disease? If they get exposed to this disease, how bad is it going to be? And what is the potential downside to vaccinating them? And the answers to those questions really formulate the vaccination protocol for that individual animal. Kind of moving beyond that, and we're talking very basic veterinary medicine here, spay and neuter. So, the question is if/when do you spay and neuter an animal? When I was in vet school, what we were taught and what we told people was you spay and neuter your dog or your cat before they're 6 months old. So that way you get them spayed or neutered before they go through puberty, and, you avoid all kinds of potential behavioral issues, what have you.
Yeah.
What we know now is that for certain breeds of dogs, particularly larger dogs, animals that are spayed and neutered later meaning after they're fully physically mature, tend to have lower levels of arthritis and lower levels of certain types of cancers. Not all cancer, but certain types of cancer like bone cancer, like hemangiosarcoma, which is a very common type of cancer in large dogs. These dogs tend to have lower incidences of those cancers. That said, if you do not spay your female dog, the older they get, the greater the chance that they are going to get a mammary tumor or breast cancer, the greater the chance that they're going to develop a pyometra, which is a uterine infection, which can be life-threatening. So again, there's no black and white in any of this. It's, the thing about medicine is when medicine is done correctly, it's individualized. It's based on what's right for your pet or what's right for you. There are very few things that are just blanketly everybody needs to do this. So these are the things you have to think about. And you know what? And I would highly encourage people to have a conversation with their veterinarian. And if you get an answer from your veterinarian that you don't like, which is, for example, you need to vaccinate your dog for distemper and parvo every year for the rest of their life, or you need to spay or neuter your dog before they're 6 months and there's no discussion, then that's when you need to start thinking about, do I need to get a second opinion? Do I need to talk to a different veterinarian? I have always said that I will talk to any client and answer any question that they have for me as long as it is presented respectfully. There are people that come in the office that come in with the attitude of, I know more than you do and you're going to do what I say. And quite frankly, it's disrespectful and it doesn't really go very well. And you'll find that most doctors, just like most people, don't respond to that type of discourse in a positive way. Yeah. But if you ask a question respectfully of, can you please explain to me why you feel that way? If you get a snarky answer at that point, then maybe it's time to look for a second opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And it's really important to do research. It's really important to be okay with the nuances, because there is no, there's no color by numbers, or what was that thing we would do? We would draw the lines from one to the other. That's not the way it is.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I mean, the kind of the running joke is there's a reason why they call them medical opinions, because we all have one. And it's not necessarily that, maybe there are definitely veterinarians who feel like my medical opinions are not correct.
Sure.
That's fine. They're entitled to theirs just like I am mine. And again, like, we don't have time to get into all of these specific nuances, but like, all of these nuances apply to other things as well, including flea and tick control, heartworm prevention, use of antibiotics, use of anti-inflammatories, name your pharmaceutical. There are times when they are appropriate to use and times when they are overused or used inappropriately. And again, if you have a question or something doesn't feel right, ask your question. Do it respectfully, but ask your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the point you brought up, where you can put 5 vets side by side, give them the same question, get 5 different answers. So really what it comes down to is find the vet that most aligns with your beliefs and your and really, really takes into consideration your pet's individual life with you, what that life is like, what you're feeding, what the environment is. I want to ask you a quick question. So when people walk into your practice, how much time do you spend with your clients?
My initial consultation with a new client or just a new pet that I haven't seen before is an hour.
Yeah.
After that, follow-ups are usually about 30 minutes, but that first consult's an hour because it frequently takes that long to kind of get through like everything we're talking about right now, to address any questions, any concerns people may have. I think one of the biggest challenges veterinarians face right now is the way that the veterinary profession is structured is unfortunately getting a lot like the way human medicine is structured, which is, as a doctor, you have such a limited amount of time to spend with somebody. There's no time to have a substantive conversation about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that, an hour. I know some that do an hour and a half. I don't know if that's necessary, but an hour I just think is minimum and absolutely imperative to get anybody's, the people going to these fast operations where it's like, they may get 6 to 15 minutes with the actual veterinarian, then about 5 to 10, 15 with the vet tech, and then check out. Slap your credit card down. You'll feel pressured. So you're not going to get all your questions answered unless you've got them written down and you're rapidly firing them off. And the vet, I don't think, can really take the time to consider, think, also be able to think. I mean, you probably see this. You've been doing this a long time. You still need that time to go, well, I wonder if this could be happening. You need time for that.
You do. You really do. And I mean, it's a little off topic and we don't have to get too far down this road, but I mean, there's a lot of problems inherent in veterinary medicine in general. And a lot of them, quite frankly, weigh very heavily upon veterinarians. Yeah. It's a high stress job. Yeah. And part of the reason for that is because we all got into this line of work because we all want to do as much as we can to help animals. And when your job is set up in such a way that it prevents you from doing that, it actually weighs on you quite a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I transitioned into what I do, into integrative medicine, because I needed to have that kind of time for me to be able to feel good about what I do. Because otherwise, like, you wind up having, like you say, you have 15 minutes to talk to somebody, and you don't really feel like you did much other than just sort of just graze the surface, and I didn't even have a chance to talk to them about, does your dog really need this vaccine? Because if I don't give it now, there's no time to give it. It's just hard to do. And, that's also why a lot of people these days are starting to turn towards concierge medicine for their own health.
Yep.
Because good luck if you're going to go to your HMO doc, and if you think you're getting more than 5 minutes in an exam room with him or her, you're probably mistaken.
Yeah. I have personally have a concierge doctor with my health plan. I have a really crappy health plan because it's cheap. And I only do that in case I break my leg. But I have my concierge doctor and I can text him. I mean, I literally text him when I have questions. Hey,
Yeah.
I've got this going on. Do you think I should come in and be seen by you? Or, and we move on. So I appreciate what you're saying because it's true. Folks, there's a different way. There's lots of options out there. And for any vets listening, you get to change how you practice medicine. So hopefully this inspires people to practice medicine the way they want to, and that's more fulfilling. So
yeah, and I will say, for any vets out there, call me. I am happy to have that chat with you, doctor to doctor, about a different way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We, I've talked this too. I've been fortunate enough to be able to. I have nice, long, very long, sometimes 3-hour long meals with great veterinarians that have said to me, the vets today are in a system that does not allow for them to solve problems. And that's why they get in the business. And I understand that your business, Dr. Richter, is one of the worst in terms of, what do they call that? Recidivism, or where people leave business?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of veterinarians are getting out of veterinary medicine because it is like I say, it's a very, very difficult profession.
Yeah. But on the other hand, these vets that I've talked to, they'll sometimes will do telemedicine, Zoom. They'll augment their practice with that, and then have these really nice, intimate sessions that instead of an $85, quick car wash appointment type of a situation with those vets, they'll do this hour-long investigative deep dive or half-hour follow-ups, which is, by the way, what I have, half-hour follow-ups. They're perfect. Half hour is great.
Yeah.
And they'll charge, say, instead of 85, they'll charge 300. Now, that looks more expensive, and it is, technically. But, folks, when you solve a problem in one appointment instead of 2 or 3, when you can shorten the time to heal by half or more, just think of all those costs that come later. They're really not factored in to this cheaper vet visit. You look at one price and you think, well, this vet's cheaper per appointment than this vet. I have never experienced a better vet who's a little bit more expensive being more expensive in the long run. You got to nip the illness or issue right away in the bud right away. And the longer you stretch that out, the worse it gets. So anyway, that's my quick commercial about being a veterinarian like you. If I was in vet school, that's where I'd go. And these vets they cannot take on new clients. They are busy all the time. Their schedule is full and their heart's full. And I think that's where you want to be if you're a veterinarian. All right. So now let's go into diet. So you're famously the formulator and behind the pet food, ultimatepetnutrition.com. It's on the screen, but it's ultimatepetnutrition.com. Let's start this way. If you screw up nutrition, it's all downhill from there. So let's talk about getting nutrition right.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I do a lot of really interesting stuff in my office that is, kind of off the beaten path from Western medicine perspective. And, we do regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy and ozone therapy and all kinds of fun stuff like that, which is awesome. Really, really amazing modalities. But what I am very quick to tell people is, if you try and do that on top of poor nutrition, you're wasting your money. It's not going to work. You're effectively building a house on a foundation of sand. There's nothing for it to sit on. Nutrition is, this all sounds very, very trite and cliche. Nutrition is the key to good health and longevity.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, cliches are cliche for a reason. It's because they tend to be true. When it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a dog or a cat or a person, the bottom line is all of our bodies are designed to function best and thrive on fresh whole foods. Now, certainly there are, different nutrient profiles that are optimal for, say, me versus my dog versus a cat. But we're all designed to eat balanced, fresh whole food diets. And that was really sort of the genesis for me of Ultimate Pet Nutrition was, in a perfect world, all of my patients would be eating, real food, fresh whole food diets. Arguably, some dogs will do better on raw versus some dogs will do better on cooked. I'm not super concerned about that aspect of it. But what we're trying to get away from is highly processed foods like kibble and canned food.
Yeah.
There are a million reasons why kibble and canned food is problematic. Both by virtue of what's not in it by way of nutrients, and what is in it by way of excess carbohydrates, artificial preservatives, and chemical compounds that are actually produced during the processing. So not something you'll see on the ingredients list, but things that just happen during the processing. Chemical compounds like advanced glycation end products, which we full well know promote inflammation and cancer. And you better believe that every pet food company that's making kibble is fully aware of the fact that their foods have these products in them. It's part of the process. And realize that the only reason why kibble and canned food exists is for you because it's convenient.
Yep.
It exists for no other reason than convenience and economics, because buying a 50-pound bag of kibble, relatively speaking, is a lot cheaper than buying an equivalent amount of fresh food. But effectively, you're just feeding them garbage. Like I say, I mean, we all know intuitively that the more fresh whole food we eat, the healthier we tend to be. So why it is that we feed our dogs, for example, highly processed kibble that's 70% carbohydrates filled with artificial preservatives, and then we all scratch our heads and wonder why they get sick. It's not a big mystery, but it is one that a lot of people, either consciously or unconsciously choose to ignore. And unfortunately, it's also a problem that the veterinary profession writ large chooses to ignore as well.
Yeah. Few thoughts. You said that whether it's raw or cooked or something is not your main consideration. I agree with you. I am a hardcore raw guy. I've been one for 25 years. Hardcore. But you can have really healthy, vibrant animals that live out their best lives as long as they're on real food.
Yeah.
And, as long as they're not, horribly, like just horrible ingredients, horrible processing, old, sitting on shelves, the oils are oxidizing, all that horrible stuff.
Yeah.
Find a really good company, stick with a really good company, and rotate nutrition, please. And I guess the other thing that comes to my mind about these AGEs and all that is they don't have to be on this packaging. And you mentioned this. You got to be really careful of what, sourcing is, that these people are paying attention to good sourcing, good processing, good packaging, all that really matters. So, these kibble companies, the ultra processed companies, people think like you have to feed whatever it is, like 3 scoops or whatever. Usually people consider scoops instead of pounds. Yeah. In the raw world, they consider pounds. So you can get away with real nutrition feeding less of your food, Dr. Richter. I'm just going to say this for you. You obviously know this. You'll feed less of Ultimate Pet Nutrition than you would an ultra-processed kibble because there's more nutrient density in Dr. Richter's food than the other. And then you also don't have all the other horrible stuff. So that's just my quick pitch on Ultimate Pet Nutrition. I've looked at the labels and you have a bunch of different proteins. So how did you come about creating this? Just real quick,
Sure.
give us your, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, a couple of things. I mean, to me, whenever I make a recommendation to a pet owner, whether it's about food or supplements or medication or anything else, I'm always cognizant of the fact that any recommendation that I make for the long term, it has to be sustainable for the pet owner. If it's not sustainable, if it's too hard to do, if it's too expensive, if it's too anything, then people aren't going to do it. And then I haven't done my patient any favors. Yeah. So when I sat down to create Ultimate Pet Nutrition, that was really at the forefront of my mind. So number one, I did it in a freeze-dried raw format. And the reason why I did that is because buying frozen food, whether it's frozen raw or frozen cooked, has some inherent drawbacks to it. Obviously, it has to stay frozen, so it's a freezer space issue. If you happen to be somebody that travels with your dog or you have a pet sitter or something, then it can become logistically difficult. Now you have to travel with frozen food. That's not easy. Freeze-dried food has basically all of the benefits of fresh frozen food, but it's freeze-dried. So basically all that's happened is at very low temperatures, all the moisture is sucked out of it. So it becomes shelf-stable. So it's shelf-stable. It weighs nothing because it's freeze-dried. So you literally put it in a bowl and add water and you're done. So it's as easy as feeding kibble, but you have all of the benefits of a fresh food diet. So that's number one. That really helps it be sustainable. Number two, from an ingredients perspective, the company that I work with to do this, we had a little bit of a disagreement up front when we first started to do this because they wanted to make a food that had multiple proteins in it. Mm-hmm. And I told them no. What I told them is it's really important that we make single protein foods because a lot of animals have sensitivities to any given protein. So, if I have a food that has like 5 different proteins in it, then we've dramatically increased the chance that any one given dog is not going to be able to eat that food. Yeah. So instead, what we did is we came out with beef, pork, and chicken as single protein ingredients. So for example, if your dog doesn't do well with beef, well, they still have 2 other options. In addition to that, this gives you the ability to rotate through protein. So you can do rotational feeding over time. And again, not only was the body designed to eat fresh whole foods, but it's not designed to eat the same food for the long term. We're all designed for variety over time. So this allows you to add in variety. Also, since we started with those first 3 formulas, I've added in a couple of other formulas that we're calling infusions that have organic bone broth added to that. And the reason why I did that is because number one, bone broth adds extra nutrition. It adds palatability, although God knows the food didn't need it anyway, because you'd be hard pressed to find a dog or a cat that doesn't like this stuff. And ironically, much like the initial formulations, I had a little disagreement with the people that I work with to make this because I told them that we were only doing this if we could use organic bone broth. And the reason for that, as you know, is when you look at animals eating food that contain pesticides and herbicides, say glyphosate, is a perfect example. When that stuff is ingested, it winds up being sequestered in the bones of the animal. So what happens when you take those bones and you boil them and you make bone broth? You're leaching all of those compounds out into the bone broth, and then you're going to feed it to your dog or your cat. And again, we're going to scratch our heads and wonder why our pets are getting sick. So thus the organic bone broth. So, again, that's me having to go a little bit toe to toe with the folks that make this stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's something that is really important that both me and you have to feel really good about your dog eating. Sure. And then the last thing I'll say about Ultimate Pet Nutrition, and this has maybe been the hardest thing to do, is, no matter what the format is, fresh foods are always going to be more expensive than kibble, because kibble is made with garbage fillers that's really cheap. So of course it's less expensive.
Yep.
I have made
let me just interject real quick. That is not the true cost of that food, and you will pay on the back end bigger costs in a shorter lifespan and more value.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you'll pay on the healthcare side without question. But my point to all of this is I have made it my priority to keep the cost, your cost of ultimate pet nutrition, on the lower end of what freeze-dried format foods generally are sold at. That is not a comment whatsoever as far as the quality of the ingredients go. It's as top quality as it gets. I've just cut the profit margin because I want more people to have access.
Yeah, no, that's great. It is a lot that goes into making products, we know, and freeze drying is expensive, takes a lot of power, takes a lot of time, especially to do it right. And so I appreciate what you're saying, what you're doing. Folks, trust me, what is that? Penny wise, dollar foolish, or is it the reverse?
Yeah. I think it's penny wise, pound foolish. Is that right? I don't know.
Okay. I'm
something
glad
like that.
Yeah. I'll go to ChatGPT later. But the expression is really, or maybe it's don't jump over dollars to save pennies. What is that? One of those. But
we'll have to have another episode on cliches.
Exactly. But as you said earlier, cliches are there's a reason why they exist, because a lot of times they're true. So this is one of those areas. Don't skimp. Don't count the pennies when you're really looking ahead in your dog's life at dollars and years. And the last thing I want is, I'd rather have a 16-year-old that lives healthy and passes away than an 18 or 19-year-old that's having a horrible life the last 10 years of his life.
Right.
And I want health span and lifespan, and it begins with nutrition. And you also have supplements at Ultimate Pet Nutrition. So let's just real quick, let's get into some supplement talk.
Sure. So let's do that. But one last thing about food that I just want to add is when it comes to fresh whole foods, it's not an all or nothing thing. If financially speaking, you just can't swing the cost of all fresh food for your dog, then feed as much fresh food as you can and feed the rest high quality kibble. You do what you can. It's not like if every meal I eat isn't fresh food that I should just give it up and just eat fast food all the time. Sure. That's not how it works. The more fresh food, the better. Don't go crazy if you can't do all. Yep. Moving on from that, supplements. I use a lot of supplements in my office. I am an herbalist. I use, Chinese herbs, Western herbs, various nutritional supplements. And I wanted to come up with some combination supplements that were really, really going to benefit my patients. And the first one that I came up with was a supplement called NutriThrive. And really the thought process behind it was I was trying to figure out how do I up-level the nutrition for my patients that are eating kibble that for whatever reason I can't get them switched over to fresh food. Okay. So it was really a question of really increasing their daily nutrition without having to increase their food. What I found after the fact, which was just sort of one of these really pleasant realizations, is that even dogs that are on fresh whole food diets did way better on NutriThrive than they were doing just on the ideal diet. So one way or the other, most, if not all dogs sort of win when you put them on a really broad spectrum supplement like this that has things in it like mushrooms, natural antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, things that are going to support their immune system. We're actually reformulating NutriThrive right now. It'll be out in a couple of months because I put some very longevity specific ingredients in it. So that's going to make it even more potent. We're also in the process of formulating a new joint supplement right now, which is going to be really exciting. I think it's literally going to be the best joint supplement on the market. That should be out relatively soon as well. So it's kind of a never-ending sort of quest for me, to see what can we do, to do better by our pets, and help people do better by their pets, because I know that so many people out there, your pets are your family. It's certainly that way for me. And I think most people want to do the right thing. They just need the tools to do it. And like I say, they need a pathway to do it in such a way that it is going to be sustainable for them to do.
Yeah, no, it's great. Let's use our remaining time for two big topics. So let's go into diagnostics, especially there's a huge surge in these at-home test kits and such that people can take advantage of. And then we'll end with some of these real elaborate, very sophisticated, in some cases, very cool anti-aging therapies. So let's talk about, what is your philosophy on the topic of diagnostics, whether they're in your vet clinic or at home?
Yeah. So I mean, to start with, I love a good diagnostic test. And I love diagnostic tests because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of what I do. Yeah. For example, we were talking a while ago about epigenetic age testing. Well, if I have an animal come in and I test its epigenetic age, and let's say the dog is chronologically 8 and its epigenetic age comes back at 10, and I put that dog on a series of supplements, and then 6 months or a year later, the dog is now 9 chronologically because it's a year later, and I do its epigenetic age and it comes back as, say, 9, that means that dog's actually picked up 2 years in the process. So what that tells me is that what I'm doing is effective. Conversely, if that number came back as 11 or 12, what that tells me is, okay, I have to change course. I have to do something else. So I love a good diagnostic test that's going to give me some guidance on, is what I'm doing effective? And whether that's epigenetic age testing or vitamin and mineral testing, omega fatty acids, you name it. There's any number of things that you can look at. But it's really, really helpful from the standpoint of eliminating some guesswork and really being able to personalize medicine, which, like I said, is really, really what needs to happen. Now, that said, there is another side of that coin from diagnostic testing, and that side is, whenever I'm thinking about recommending any given test for one of my patients, the question that I'm really asking myself in my head is, how are the results of this test going to change my treatment plan? So for example, I had a dog in my office the other day that had some back pain, and a previous veterinarian had recommended that this dog get an MRI. Well, this dog's back pain was nowhere to the level where we would be talking about the dog needs to go to surgery. So what I talked to the client about is like, okay, well, we can do this MRI. It's going to cost many thousands of dollars. Your dog's going to have to be anesthetized. And what we're going to come away with is, like, maybe your dog has some disc disease, maybe it doesn't. But the bottom line is your dog has back pain, and we're going to have the same set of treatment options that we do right now, not having the results of the MRI. Certainly, if I could snap my fingers and have the results, that would be groovy. Yep. But, there's both financial costs and cost to the animal, by virtue of stress, anesthesia, what have you, to do these things. Yep. So you got to think about, like, is this going to change what my treatment options are? And sometimes the answer to that question is no. It does, it's not always going to give you new treatment options. Like if I have, for example, an old cat in my practice that I know has kidney failure, do I need to keep checking that animal's kidney function every month or every 2 months? Why? So I can just keep proving the fact that I know it has kidney disease? At some point, the most important thing is that we do everything that we can to keep that cat comfortable and happy. And me understanding what that cat's numbers are on blood work on a regular basis is not going to expand my list of options to make that cat feel better. So, as you and I were talking before, I would always rather spend my clients' money on treatment rather than diagnostics, because the one guarantee that I can give you with any given diagnostic test is it's not going to make your pet feel any better. The MRI is not making that dog feel better. The blood work's not making that cat feel better. And if it's not going to change what we can do, then spend your money elsewhere.
And spending the money on treatment can mean food and supplements.
Absolutely. Food, supplements, medicine, treatment, you name it. Could be anything.
Could be acupuncture, chiropractic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My vet says the same thing, and all my vets have said the same thing, and I appreciate that. It's being judicious and, not just getting data for data's sake. It's really interesting how people do that. And so on the home tests, there's just a huge amount of home tests. We see this a lot with our clients, our customers at Gussys that are getting like these, microbiome tests.
Sure.
And there's one out there that's a functional test. So it basically extrapolates like your dog may have leaky gut. So it's easy to understand for most vets, but most vets don't know how to read the other tests that just count probiotic species.
Right.
So it's like, well, I just tell people, look, it's very simple. If decide if what you're going to get back is something you can use and put into action. And if your vet even knows how to read and understand, and how is your treatment going to change based on that?
No, those are all great points. And the one thing that I'll add to that, because as you mentioned, there is an ever increasing number of home administered diagnostic tests that people can run. You can just order online.
Yeah.
Just because you can order that test online and that the company says it does something doesn't mean that it does that. Yeah. Like everything else in life on the internet these days, you have to be a discerning shopper. If a company says, oh, send us in a hair sample and we're going to test it against 300 different allergens and tell you what your pet is allergic to, that's BS. The science doesn't work that way. So, you have to be an educated consumer, or you're A, wasting money, and B, chasing down rabbit holes based on junk science. So, if you feel like you can be discerning enough to dig into the science of how any diagnostic test is run, then by all means, you should do that. If not, take it up with somebody who does. I mean, I'm happy to have those conversations with my clients. There are certainly home test kits out there that I think are very valuable, and other ones that I think are just a complete scam.
Yeah. It's really the human nature component. It is so interesting because people think there may be a problem, and some people really want is it to be over really fast and cheaply. And so that product fills that need. And then what happens is I'm fascinated by the human nature, and there's a lot of people that are really interested in the layaway plan on everything. So, that we talked about the kibble and the externalized costs are so far downstream, they don't connect the dots and think, well, this $10,000 in my vet that I've been spending, I could have been spending on my pet's better quality healthy food. And the same thing with diagnostics. People just go, I just would like something. I'd like, even if it's a horoscope being read of my dog, they just want something. But then there's nothing that can come of it. Seeing a psychic is about as good as some of these tests, and actually getting a actual plan together to get your dog well. Sure. And again, the opportunity costs that you lose, the time is not good. Taking more time. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. So let's talk about a lot of these therapies that are in your book, I've done. So with my last two dogs that are now gone, but I've done them especially in their older years. So sure. Let's talk about some of the cool things you can do. They may cost a little bit more money, but they have a really good result.
Yeah, sure. So gosh, where to begin? Right. I think to begin, there certainly is a very, very long list of supplements that one can look at to promote health and longevity. If you pick up, one of my books, either Longevity for Dogs or Longevity for Cats, you'll find that there's a very long list of supplements and guidance on how to pick which ones to use when. Yeah. Because again, it's not a question of like give everything all at once. There's a strategy to all of this. Moving beyond that, there's some very interesting new things out there, both pharmaceutically and regenerative medicine wise. Pharmaceutically, one of the drugs that's getting a lot of attention is a drug called rapamycin. Rapamycin is a drug that is being investigated both in animals and in people as a pro-longevity drug. There is a study that just recently concluded called the Dog Longevity Project. I don't think their final results are published yet, but the preliminary results that were coming out were very, very promising. Rapamycin is a prescription pharmaceutical. You would have to get that from your veterinarian. But, that's a thing that can be looked at. You may be familiar with things called peptides. Peptides are they're strings or strands of amino acids. They're sort of pieces of proteins, if you will. And what the body uses peptides for is they're signaling compounds. So, one part of your body may produce a peptide to sort of launch off into the bloodstream to signal more distant parts of your body to do things. So, for example, if you're getting a lot of exercise, your brain may secrete peptides to tell your muscles to make more muscle tissue. And we were talking a little while ago about epigenetics and omics and that whole cascade. Well, part of that cascade is what leads to what's called intercellular communication. So that's cells in the body talking to other cells in the body. And part of the way they do that is with these signaling compounds like peptides. Peptides are getting a lot of attention in human medicine for various reasons. I'm sure everybody is familiar with drugs like Ozempic that people are being used to lose weight. Ozempic is a peptide. Ozempic is a peptide that basically is telling your body to react to the way it digests and assimilates food differently than normally it would. I mean, your body normally produces these kinds of peptides, just not in the quantities that you would if you supplement with them. So that's a really good example of how potent these peptides can be. All you need to do is watch television to get an idea of how popular these things are. And frankly, they're popular because they work. You can talk all day long about the pros and cons of them, but they actually are effective. Yeah. And there are peptides for damn near everything you can think of: gut health, muscle growth, cognitive function, bone health, heart health, you name it. There's a peptide for it. And there's a lot of us that are looking into using these peptides in animals as well. I have used them on a fairly limited basis in my patients, a lot of it for chronic GI related things. I was actually just talking with a friend of mine a couple of days ago who is a physician who's starting to use a peptide called cerebrolysin in his patients that have cognitive issues, whether it is cognitive issues caused by autoimmune disease, triggered by, say, like Lyme or some other like autoimmune encephalopathy, or people that have Alzheimer's and dementia are showing really, really promising results. Great. Fair knowledge, I haven't used this in an animal. I literally just heard about it like 2 days ago for the first time. Yeah. But I find it really fascinating, and that is going to be something I'm going to be looking into because cognitive dysfunction, as dogs and cats get older, is a thing, and we see that a lot. So maybe that's something that there's something that we can help with. Moving beyond that, regenerative medicine, be it hyperbaric oxygen therapy, ozone medicine, stem cell therapy, platelet-rich plasma, you name it, all that stuff is out there in the veterinary field these days. And maybe kind of the last thing that I'll throw out there, and it's really in its infancy right now, are wearable biometric devices. So, everybody's familiar with, Apple Watch, Fitbit, Oura Ring. You might also be familiar with these devices that people can wear now as continuous blood glucose monitors.
Yeah.
Those are actually used in diabetic animals now. Those CGMs. So those things are pretty cool. But there's more and more research going into wearables for animals that would be able to sort of measure the biometric health of your animal on a day-to-day basis. It's actually a company that I've started called Petmetrics, and that's exactly what we're developing. Because needless to say, the one thing you can say about all veterinary patients, they're all nonverbal patients. And they're nonverbal patients that will go out of their way to not tell you when something's wrong with them. So being able to get a window into your dog or your cat's health before they overtly look sick is an enormous advantage when it comes to both veterinary care and, as a pet owner, your ability to take the best care of your pet. So that's why I founded Petmetrics. We are hopefully, less than a year away, from having a product out on the market. So that's all super exciting. The future, be it with things like peptides and regenerative medicine, or, the back end power of what can be done now with AI as far as wearables go. It's going to be an amazing leap forward when it comes to healthcare.
Right on. That's great. Well, a lot of those, from rapamycin to the peptides, they're in the human world, the Andrew Hubermans and the Dr. Peter Attias and all that are talking about them. And we can do the same things in a lot of cases to our dogs. Maybe not so much our cats, but you need a vet who knows what they're talking about and who's done them before. And
sure.
And I think it's also, we'll just come back to this again, which is none of those things are going to save your dog if they have the wrong nutrition. So again, good nutrition, good exercise, good loving is the first foundation, the first three foundations of anti-aging. So, but I've done all those that we've talked about. I can't remember if you said fecal transplants. Did you talk about those?
We did not, but I mean, that's yet another thing. Fecal transplantation, especially for animals with chronic gastrointestinal issues, can be an enormously powerful thing.
Yeah. Chiropractic, acupuncture, herb therapy that you do. These are all still older, but that doesn't mean that it's not as still as amazing. These are incredible therapies that you can keep your animal healthy, inflammation low, feeling good, feeling limber and young, just like we want to feel. We don't want our dog, when they get up out of their bed, to feel like some people do when they get out of their couch and they make that sound. Oh,
yeah, right. Exactly.
And the thing is, dogs will, as you said, will go out of their way not to tell you how they're feeling. They will hide those feelings because that's how they are.
Yes.
Instinctively.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Richter, thank you so much. Get Dr. Richter's book. Go to his website, Dr. Gary Richter, Richter. And if you are interested in leveling up your ultra processed and any diet you have, go to ultimatepetnutrition.com, and that's where his supplements are also. So, Dr. Richter, thank you.
Thank you so much. And the books are available on Amazon. Make your life easy.
Make your life easy.
Longevity for dogs and longevity for cats. Amazon. Go.
Good. And on nutritional supplements, be careful what you get from Amazon. Always go to the source, the company. If they sell on Amazon, they'll tell you where their page is. Get it from a reputable source, because there's a lot of counterfeit out there. Agreed. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And Dr. Richter, thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.